Well, a very warm welcome into this episode 29 of the Huddle UK podcast. The NFL London series has come and gone. I hope everyone who went had a good time. I know I certainly did with that final game at Wembley Stadium, although it was a little bit one-sided. We'll get into all those games in a minute. Just to, as I always do right at the start, just before we get into all the meat and bones of today's episode, please remember to go visit HuddleUK.com. I know if you're listening to this podcast, I really appreciate that. We really appreciate the support, but there's loads of great online content over at HuddleUK.com. We've just published the news today of Brandon Graham coming out of retirement for the Eagles, so that's a really interesting talking point this week. So Nathan's quick on the pulse there to get that story up on the website, and loads more great content. So visit HuddleUK.com for all the latest news, views from all of our 32 writers. We are up to a full complement of 32 writers, which is excellent. So whoever you support, there is something for you over on the website. If you're watching this on YouTube, please click the subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss any of the content. And everything you can find us on social media, we're at Join the Huddle UK. That's the plug-in done. As always at the start, thank you very much for tuning into this episode. I'm the host, Philip Marsh. As always, alongside me today, a regular guest now on the show, the Buffalo Bills writer for the website and good friend of mine, Jake. Jake, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me back.
Good to have you back. We've had you on talking about the Bills and different parts, but you know, I've mentioned it on a few podcasts. You are of the friendship group of the NFL guys. I thought I would be more my character, but it's very much your character to like to dig in deep into the numbers, find the stats.
Just say it, Phil. Just say it. I'm a massive nerd. That's what you're dancing around.
Around that point, yeah. But you are in it, and today we are talking numbers. We will make it interesting, I promise. But we are going to be talking about some numbers, different numbers, in fact, because most seasons, maybe this is just the view that I've got for this season, but most seasons when we get to week 7, week 8, week 9, we hit the middle of the season, there is one or two real strong contenders. Like there's no debating it. The Chiefs were running away with it last year. The Eagles, I think, were still unbeaten. They dropped one game against Tampa Bay, maybe. But, you know, there were 2 or 3 every season at this stage, either unbeaten or just one defeat teams that don't really have many bad marks against them. This year, I know the Indianapolis Colts are 6-1, and they look very, very good, and we'll get into those a bit later on. But even them, it feels a struggle to say that, you know, this is a bona fide Super Bowl contender. I think the odds reflect that as well. So do you think, you know, I think from the outside, that's making this a really fun season because anyone can seem to beat anyone on their day. So I guess the question, what you put it down to is, it's really hard to summarize with 32 teams, but I guess it does prove the parity of the league. It is really competitive this year.
Yeah, I think that so what I'm putting the Colts down to this season as to why obviously our good friend Tom, who's been on the pod, I think every week roughly he likes to drop us a message almost as in shock that the Colts are good, even though it's now been 7 kind of weeks of that, give or take. So I'm very much on board with it. You're very much on board with it. He seems to not be yet. He seems to be still kind of pinching himself over it. I think the Colts have got the anti-Chiefs from last season. Last season, the Chiefs won all their games by 1 score, and everybody was sat there going, how are they doing this? They're not actually very good. Kelsey seems a bit washed. You know, the offense isn't very efficient at all, and they just kept finding ways to win games, and it was infuriating for, I think, the neutrals who were maybe tired of it, and they obviously got their comeuppance at the end. But we were looking at it and no one wanted to rule them out because they were wearing Chiefs uniforms, and we'd seen it time and time before. I think with the Colts, we've got the reverse, right? So you're looking at a Colts team that has been quite bad for a couple of years now. With spearheading them is a quarterback who's looked even worse during his career. It just doesn't seem to add up to the parts that we're then seeing on the field. And I think that's the complete role reversal, that if you put last year's Chiefs in Colts uniforms, you go, well, that makes a bit more sense. So, I think it's a bit of recency bias in terms of what we've seen, particularly when Daniel Jones is involved.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. As I said a minute ago, we are going to be talking a lot of Colts at the end of this episode. We've got our own Colts writer, Ed, going to be joining us, but also Rondo, who's the host of First and 56th, which is a Colts podcast from over in Indiana in the States. So he's going to be joining us at the end of the episode just to, I guess, sum up how they're feeling, because as you just mentioned, our good friend Tom is still in this state of daze, really struggling to comprehend what we're seeing. And as you just mentioned, Daniel Jones, who saw that coming?
Yeah.
I've seen loads of videos from the summer of sort of YouTube content creators making jokes about, if Anthony Richardson can't beat Daniel Jones to the starting job, the Colts really are screwed. And then he didn't, and the Colts are better. And it's a very strange situation. Anyway, I'm going to save the nitty gritty of the Colts for towards the end. The whole point of this episode is we're going to try and work out who the best team in the NFL is by looking at the numbers, not just, they look good or we like this team, is what do the numbers actually say? Because there are a million ways that people say, oh, this is the best team. Some as simple as just they've won more games. Some are far more statistical than that. And we're going to go through them. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the graphs on the screen. We will describe them for you if you're listening on Spotify or wherever you're listening to the podcast. So we're going to run through, we've got 6 different rankings of the teams. We're going to go through them and see which ones we like, we don't like, why they work and why some of them don't work. We'll start with the really obvious one, which is the way the NFL is ranked, and that's in wins. And the win column, currently the team at the top of the win column with 6 wins is the Indianapolis Colts. They're on their own with 6 wins. It's very surprising that there's only one team with 6 wins after 7 weeks. And then you've got a litany of other teams that are all there with 5 wins, including the Broncos, the Patriots, the Eagles, the 49ers, a few teams there. I mean, particularly the Patriots didn't expect to be saying their name in this column. So wins is the go-to, isn't it? That's the league system. But I guess the obvious drawback, which we have to talk about when it comes to wins, is it doesn't take into account who they've played.
No, it doesn't. I think one of the biggest areas of debate in the NFL as well is whether or not a win is a quarterback stat. If you look at Eli Manning's record, is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer? He's got 2 Super Bowls to his name, arguably against the GOAT. No, definitely against the arguable GOAT. But his winning record as the Giants QB is barely above 500. And that has always counted against him, regardless of the rest of his stats. So, yeah, I think wins is a very divisive one for exactly that reason. You get teams a little bit like the Patriots, not to throw shade their way. They are surprisingly good early on under the variable system, but they've also played quite average opponents. We've not really seen them tested. I know they beat the Bills, but the Bills aren't on this list for a reason because they themselves have been disappointing. So, I think that there's exactly that some of these teams have played very good opponents and some ultimately haven't. And that's ultimately not to die on the hill of wins. It's certainly not at this point in the season anyway.
No, the flip argument, though, is that if you're a Patriots fan and you're listening to this, it's a bit of an old cliche across all sports, but you can only beat what's in front of you. So, if you're the Patriots, you're saying, well, we've got 5 wins, and yes, we have beaten a list of average teams. They absolutely laid the smackdown on Tennessee last week. That was a real Mike Vrabel revenge game. The grass isn't always greener, is it, on the other side?
I've seen a lot of Titans fans, and I work with a couple actually of Titans fans who it's reached a point for them where they actually, bless them, are struggling to enjoy football. It's really reached that point where they don't want to see the Titans in the early 6 p.m.s because it'll ruin the 9:30 kickoffs for them, obviously over here in the UK. So yeah, a bit of a challenge for them there. But I think also we get the winningest as well, like the winningest.
Can we just quickly say that's not a word? I know it is a word in the NFL, but it's not a word. It's a word that really winds me up. Winningest. I know it's an American thing. This is a UK podcast, and American fans, if they see this, I'm sorry, that's not a word. Winningest. I don't like it. I don't want it, and I'm scrapping it from the podcast from this point moving forward.
Good. Cut that entirely from the pod. But yeah, so wins. I think when you look at wins at the end of a season, I think you can fundamentally say that you've played most of the league, or at least half, and that's a good barometer. But certainly early days of the season, you can face a team and that's why I really like the divisional change-up. The Jets team that the Bills faced week 1, I'm anticipating a very different Jets team by the end of the season. I was expecting them to get better. I don't know now if that's going to be the case, but it's the progression that a team goes through, whether it's injuries or just scheme over the course of the season, just completely changes what the value of that win as a statistic actually was.
Yeah, on a podcast where we're talking about the best teams in the NFL, I'm surprised that the Titans and the Jets have already both been mentioned. I'm sorry to fans of those two teams.
Yeah.
Moving on then to the second rank. This is a stat which is very commonly used in British football. We would call it goal difference, but we're going to call it points differential here. Very simply, the number of points the offense has scored minus the number of points the team has conceded. And I was quite surprised, not by the teams in this list, but by the margin in this list. So the Colts are on top once more with 92 points of points differential. That's obviously in the positive. Second place is a massive, almost 30 points behind at 64, and that's the Detroit Lions in second. Chiefs then at 62, Rams then at 58, and Seahawks then at 57. So there's a real wide margin that the Colts are setting this standard. And I don't want to talk about them too much because we are going to get into them a bit later on, but that's quite a statement, isn't it? That to be so far clear. How do you like this stat compared to the win stat?
So I think this stat does tell you a lot more about what a team is like mentally, and how they match up against some of the teams. I think, where you've seen one score games a lot, particularly I think in years gone past, I think we saw Kirk Cousins dining off of one score games for quite a while. And that brings a completely different kind of area to the game. But what the Colts are doing is the Colts here are just putting the beat down on teams. Now, admittedly, some of those teams aren't phenomenal, teams, but that's their schedule. And like you say, you can only beat what's in front of you. But it's one thing to beat a team. It's another thing to put the hammer down on them. That I think is kind of testament to how solid they are. I don't want to get into them too much because I know we've got lots more Colts content to go. I think the one that jumps out to me there, though, Phil, the most is the Lions being at 64. Because you might have this to hand, but the Lions smacked the Bears really hard in, what was it, week 2, after they themselves had been, kind of manhandled by the Packers. So a lot of that 64 is going to be a, hammering of could you call it a revenge game on
the coaches,
on the coaches, like, just those two going. Yeah, I don't know what you really want to call that. There's no actual revenge there. I don't think Dan Campbell will call it that either. But the majority of those points will come from that game.
Just to highlight your point, it's 31 of the 64 points, so pretty much half of that points differential for the Lions. Of course, you have to take into account when they're losing games, that counts against this statistic. But in the positive, half of those numbers have come from that one game.
Yeah, or if the Chiefs hadn't played the Raiders in week 7. And started kneeling the ball game out with 2.5 minutes to go, which is a different way. Whereas the Colts are just putting more points on the board, the Chiefs were happy with 31. They actually scored more points than the Raiders' offense ran plays in that game. That is a statistic that tells you everything you need to know about how that game went.
Oh, it's such a bad game if you're a Raiders fan. It was I was then watching it after the Wembley game, and I don't have any love for either the Raiders or the Chiefs, but there was even a part of me that took pity on them when the Chiefs are kneeling with 2.5 minutes on the clock. It's been an awful game.
Did you see the trick play as well that Mahomes ran?
Is this with a bit of language we can't repeat?
The language which we can't repeat for obvious reasons, which you look at that and you go, okay, teams run that all the time. You take the delay of game, you take the 5-yard penalty, and that's just salt in the wound. So, in many ways, both. That is statistically, that proves the point, though, that the Chiefs, most of their points, 31 of those 62 points, have come from that game. But equally, that game was such a beatdown that it probably does kind of deserve to catapult the Chiefs to where they are right now. I think probably the Seahawks being on 57 is quietly the one where they've gone about their business largely on defense in terms of like how stingy they've been, allowing the offense to just do their job, and they've just accrued 57 kind of positive points over the course of the first 7 weeks. So I think that's the one that for me doesn't seem like so much of a one-off outlier.
I'm going to leave my JSN fanboy in for later when we return to another statistic.
Well, having said that, I mean, we've mentioned the Titans, we've mentioned the Jets, we haven't mentioned the Saints yet, and they are a large reason as to why the Seahawks have positive 57 points. If that was just first half points, then that would also probably be very, very similar as well. That was how bad a game that was for them. So, each of those teams has pretty much pounded someone, which speaks volumes about the statistic.
Statistic number 3 we're going to move on to is the least football statistic, and it's the betting market. The Vegas odds is what we'd probably call it in NFL terms, and this is simply the top 5 teams according to most average bookmakers of who will win the Super Bowl this year. And this is sort of the list of teams that you would kind of expect to be in there, but the favourites at 9-2, because it's them, is the Kansas City Chiefs are the favourites. The Detroit Lions next at 6-1, 13-2, narrowly behind is the Buffalo Bills. Narrowly again behind at 7-1 is the Green Bay Packers. And then at 17-2 or 8.5 is the reigning champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. Colts nowhere to be seen. Rams nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
Seahawks nowhere to be seen. And then the
Broncos. Where are the Broncos, Phil? They were your tip. As a Chargers fan, you were so sure they were going all the way.
That's still my tip. I'm not losing. I'm dying on that hill. That I think the Broncos are going to get to the Super Bowl. I have had shaky moments, particularly after 3 quarters against the Giants. But that fourth quarter was unbelievable. I think JJ McCarthy early on in the season thought he had the best fourth quarter performance by a quarterback locked down for this season, and Bo Nix turned in one of the best quarters in football I've ever seen. Like, frustratingly as a Chargers fan, but good for my vibes and opinions on the Broncos.
And all of your many fantasy football teams, I'm sure, would have benefited.
Yeah, although I don't. How much did Cortland Sutton catch? Anyway, that's by the by. The Vegas odds are, every bookmaker has got its own logic for putting together the statistics of who they think have the shortest odds. It's obviously based as well on how much the public are betting on these teams, but that gives you a kind of general idea of public consensus is in the odds. So I think that goes back to our point, doesn't it, about the Indianapolis Colts? They're the best team on point differentials, they're the best team on wins, and yet don't come top 5 in terms of Vegas odds. Do you think this is a bit of Chiefs PTSD, that they're still top of this list, or do you think that the odds are right and they are or should be the favourites to win the Super Bowl?
So this one's an interesting one. I think that what you're seeing here is a little bit of a hangover. In many cases, you've got both of last season's Super Bowl entries in the top 5. You've also got the Detroit Lions and the Buffalo Bills there. So, the teams that have gone deep the years previous. I think what we're seeing, though, and I'd be really intrigued with this statistic, is to see how these odds have changed week to week through the season. Because obviously the Chiefs have gone through their blip. I think everyone had their meltdown kind of 2-3 weeks ago. Rashee Rice is back now. The offense is scoring points again, and everybody's happy in Kansas City. So naturally, them ascending probably back to the top. I'm sure that at the start of the season, they were not the bookies' favourites. I believe that was probably the Bills or the Eagles. And both of those teams have shown issues. And the Bills are going through theirs right now, really hoping that Sunday goes slightly better and they show that they've learned their lesson. I think that's why they're hanging on there. I think the Bills, this is the only rank that we see the Bills score particularly highly in, and it's just speculation, which is worrying, isn't it, that people are just speculating that the Bills might put it together. But I think that's to show that, if the Bills come out and the next 2 weeks they put it together against the Panthers and then the Chiefs, are we back? Is everybody back on board with the Bills winning the Super Bowl again if they beat the Chiefs in 2 weeks' time? They'd be sat 6-2, and you'd be back on board with them, wouldn't you? So I think that's what we're seeing in the betting odds there. I think the Packers as well are another team that, for so much of this weekend's game against the Cardinals, you were just waiting for them to put it together and just pull away from the Cardinals, and it just never happened. And the Cardinals at no point really looked particularly good. And then Micah Parsons closed that game out for them, and that's why you pay him a quarterback salary. But really, that game should have been put away before the final drive. And I suppose that's what Packers fans will want to see in order for that to improve from 7 to 1, which is still quite strong odds, I would say. So I'm not going to go put a 5 on that.
And I'm now very intrigued to see where the Broncos are, because you said that. I'm going to look that up in a moment. Are there any teams that you're surprised don't make this top 5 list in terms of the Vegas odds?
So I think that in the reverse of that, I think the Colts are being hard done by here. And it's probably because they've started so low. I imagine when there was a debate as to whether it was going to be Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson, I would have loved to have known what the Super Bowl odds were at the time then. Probably incredibly high. But I think that we're slowly going to see them creep into this. But my argument there would be, well, we've seen issues with the Jags. The Texans seem to have vanished suddenly, and that's a massive disappointment there, considering what they invested in terms of their draft capital. And then obviously the Titans. So the Colts are almost, I wouldn't say certainly going to win their division at this point. The Jags are still there, but the Colts know that they're going to definitely be playoff bound at this current rate. They're going to potentially have home field advantage in at least one game. The AFC is wide open, so there's no reason why they couldn't have full home advantage all the way through. And you're looking at that going, well, why can't they? Their defense has been one of the leading examples, behind why they're so solid. So you'd argue, yeah, they've got as much of a case. So to not see them in the top 5 is I'd be disappointed if I was a Colts fan.
They do narrowly miss out on this list. I've just got it up. The next team are the Rams at 10 to 1, and then it's the Colts at 11s. And then there's a bit of a gap then to both the Broncos and the Chargers at 18 to 1. So the Broncos are close.
Okay.
They're three off. But yeah, the Colts and the Rams are very close to this top 5. And then there is a noticeable gap then to the rest. So yeah, I think you're right in what you're saying in that the Colts are creeping up there, because at the start of the season, the odds would have been so high because nobody saw this coming. I don't think even the most optimistic Colts fan saw this coming, particularly when they named Daniel Jones the starter. Moving on to rank 4, this is where you're going to get where you enjoy yourself.
Indulge.
The numbers are really going to come out now. So we're going to do our best to explain this. The sort of metrics we've ticked off so far are very, I don't want to say basic or easy, but very easy to understand. The next 2, slightly more complicated. And then the final one I had never heard of until I was preparing for this podcast. I will hold my hands up and admit that. So number 4, which we'll put on the screen now if you're watching over on YouTube, is called EPA per play. Now, I will read out the exact definition of what that says. EPA is a metric that measures the efficiency of a single play by calculating the change in the team's expected points added. So EPA, expected points added. So it's the difference between the expected points before and after a play. So, over multiple plays, when you average it out, how much is the team improving, what their chances of scoring are play by play. And this is over the course of an entire season that we're looking at these numbers. It's I guess the best way to describe it is efficiency, average efficiency over the course of a season on offense. And once again, we go back to it. The Colts have a wide margin lead here. So the numbers sound very small. The Colts lead this with 0.21. But if that's every play, you're averaging an increase on your predicted points of 0.2. After 5 plays, you're expected to get an extra point by the end of the game. You run up 30 plays, you're 6 points above what the market says. So the Colts at 0.21 are by far, the numbers are minuscule, but they are big in terms of the margin in comparison, as 0.06 more. 0.5 more, than the Chiefs. Then you have the Packers. We have a first appearance on this list for the Dallas Cowboys, and then the Buffalo Bills. So this is a very nerdy metric. This is a metric which, the real statisticians like ourselves like to look at, to deep dive into some of the numbers. I think the Cowboys being on here says a lot about them as a team, because the Cowboys are third, or I have to get my list again quickly here. For this metric, they are 4th on offense. They are 29th on the defensive side of things. So defensively, they're really bad. The issue with this metric, obviously, which I will then lead on to you, is that this only does cover offense, doesn't it?
Yeah. So it's It's a really interesting one. I think this solves the conundrum of things like garbage time, and it solves the conundrum of, oh, well, you've only played kind of good opponents or bad opponents, and elements like that, and the game script. So, we're starting to get into the weeds of, we started with wins, and you're starting to get into the weeds of, well, actually, what is the true value of the position that some of these teams find themselves in? And yeah, I think that the Cowboys are, I mean, are they the best offense in football? If you put them with any other defensive unit, would they not be? Yeah, their run game is incredibly solid. Arguably, their run game is solid because no one is stacking the box against them. Whilst you've got Pickens and CeeDee Lamb out there, and Jake Ferguson is a very, very good kind of third rate possession receiver. So yeah, I think their offense is just really blowing teams away now, and it's becoming the fact that they have to, because they can't rely on their defense to do anything. They're paying Deron Bland and Trevon Diggs an insane amount of money to not do anything. Would be the best way of describing it. They're not catching passes. They're for interceptions. They're not even really tackling anyone. They're just allowing people to blow past them. I know Deron Bland did get the pick six, but as EPA per play would suggest, that was in garbage time with the opposition chasing. So yeah, it's these sorts of things that this statistic takes into account.
Yeah, and just to quickly mention, the numbers that you can see on the screen here, as we mentioned, are for the offense, where it's Colts, then Chiefs, then Packers, then Cowboys, then Bills. The reverse side, you want to be negative. On defense, you want your EPA to be negative because you're reducing the number of points that your opposition are going to score. And just a shout out to the Texans defense, because they are by far the highest in the defensive EPA metric. And then it's tied for second with the Lions, the Broncos, and the Rams. And then another team that I didn't think would feature on this episode, but the Cleveland Browns. Then, as we know, a very good defense, just not a very good offense. But yeah, so the Texans, the Lions, the Broncos, Rams, and I'm surprised the Bears are actually sixth on that list. I did not foresee that coming, but there's some good players on that defense.
They've been scoring. I mean, Phil, I've got something for you. So, would you like to have a guess at? I've got the top 5 all-time EPA per play. So the offenses that really cut the mustard. Would you like to give me a couple that you think might have made the top 5? So offenses of a particular team in history, and I can tell you that they are all since 2000.
Yes, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, the best offense in the history of football at present is the current Colts. Is that not correct? I saw something which said that the Colts currently have the best I'm going to have to look at what this metric was now. But there was a metric that I saw going around social media that said the Colts offense is the best of all time in one statistic. But it's not the one that you're talking about. I imagine that the Patriots, the Brady era Patriots,
the 2007 Patriots that went 16-0, they are plus 0.31. They come in third all time.
Oh wow, okay. Go on, hit me with the rest of the list then.
So you've got, we'll start with 5. So you do have the Colts on this list, but it's Peyton Manning's 55 touchdown season in 2013, that was 0.29. You've got Drew Brees in 2011 with 0.3. That was the season that he set the passing yardage record. Then you've got the 2007 Brady, the kind of invincible team until the Super Bowl. You've got the 2011 Aaron Rodgers season, finished 15-1, just incredibly efficient that season. So it's not just about putting up big numbers, it's also about efficiency. So that was plus 0.33. And then it is the 2018 Patrick Mahomes, his MVP season, where I think just Tyreek Hill just really took off. They really did torch everybody that season.
Yeah, the statistic I have just found is that it's the number of points per drive.
Yes.
With 3.62, the Colts are the highest in the last century, topping the 2007 Patriots and 2000 Rams are the teams that come second and third in that list, which is remarkable. I mean, fair play. I keep saying it, but I tip my hat to what the Colts have done this year. So that's EPA per play.
Yeah.
And then potentially even more nerdy and statistical. I think this is potentially your favorite one. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of DVOA. So that is what's going to be on people's screens if they're watching this. Is DVOA, which is defense adjusted over average. Which effectively takes into account a little bit more than just what EPA take in. It takes into the account the context with which the actual yardage and points are accumulated. So very much takes into account garbage time and things like if you are on your own 20-yard line and you need 1 yard to get a first down and you get 1 yard, good for you. That's what you needed. You probably didn't run a play to get you 10 yards. So therefore, if someone was to then run a play where they needed 10 yards, but they only got 1 yard, statistically speaking, both teams have achieved 1 yard. And you might on the face of it think, well, they're even. They're not even, because in both of those situations, the team needed something else. They didn't perform to the level which would have got them what they needed, and therefore that needs a metric to measure that. That's even before you get into measuring how well the opposition has been playing on average. So that's where DVOA comes into it, to really put the context behind. If you're a fantasy football player, DVOA is massive because you can effectively dine off of the fact that if you have a team that's incredibly positive in DVOA, but doesn't necessarily find themselves in positive game scripts very often, you could still get quite a lot of fantasy football points if that's what you need, just by simply picking, quite frankly, a bit of a poor team. So Dak Prescott owners right now know exactly what that feels like. Dak is throwing for his life. George Pickens is catching for his life. They're putting up points, but they're not necessarily winning games. It's simply the script that they find themselves in.
And looking at the numbers on the screen again, if you're over on YouTube watching this, for me, while there is one team at the top, there's sort of like a cluster of 3 teams in this list that are set above. Then you've got a team quite clear in 4th, and then it drops once more quite dramatically to 5th. The team that win in this metric, which is QJSN hype time, is the Seattle Seahawks. And the numbers are based on percentages, is what you're saying. How much do they need it in the play? When does it happen? Obviously, you want this. Nobody's ever going to get 100% in this. That would be absolutely absurd. But the higher the percentage, the better. So the Seahawks are just shy of 42% in this metric, with the Lions then just shy of 40%, very, very fractionally above the Colts, who once again feature on the list. Then there's a drop of 5% down to the LA Rams in 4th, and then a massive drop of about 8% to the Chiefs in 5th. And obviously it continues going down and down from there. The Seahawks top this list. I think, let's talk about Sam Darnold. That's the player, obviously, offenses run through their quarterback. And at the start of last year in Minnesota, there was this, Sam Darnold's back, or not necessarily back, but Sam Darnold is
Has
a good
arrived.
Yeah, Sam Darnold got through the bad times and he's actually proven himself to be a very good NFL quarterback. And then as the season wore on in Minnesota, and particularly the last game of the season against the Lions, and then in the playoffs, people were like, that's Sam Darnold. That's the guy we remember. And when he went to the Seahawks this offseason, I think the lingering memory of those final few games were what people were kind of expecting. They thought, he might be able to command this offense, but he's not going to really elevate this team. But he's looking like the Sam Darnold for the first 10 weeks of last season. And this Seahawks team, I didn't think they were going to be legit, but every time I watch them, they look fantastic. I know they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but that was my favorite game of the season a few weeks ago. And, 2 quarterbacks in Baker and Darnold who got ruled out. Their careers were told, they weren't going to make it. And now look where they are. So, the Seahawks top this metric. How do you assess Darnold? Because it's been a hell of a career for him to date.
So I'm going to take an L on Sam Darnold in terms of it's been a roller coaster of an experience. So when he entered the league, obviously same draft class as Josh Allen, I wanted Sam Darnold to go to the Bills. So I saw more potential from him at the time. I actually didn't like Josh Allen. I'm quite happy to admit it. Didn't like Josh Allen's inaccuracies. That's one thing that as a rookie quarterback, you've really got to accommodate for. So fortunately, figured it out. not too bad. But for Darnold, I liked how he was processing, and I liked the fact that he was the youngest coming out of the class. And so there was the upside that maybe we hadn't seen the most from him. Yeah, I mean, his time in New York, I think we can say that he's not the first quarterback to go to either side of New York and not necessarily flourish. And then obviously coming out of there, Minnesota, working with Kevin O'Connell, we saw a different version of him. I then, on going to Seattle, wasn't sure. Not necessarily because of him, but because of actually Seattle's offensive line hasn't necessarily been the greatest for years, hasn't been the greatest when Russell Wilson was there running for his life. But I wasn't sure about their offensive line coming into the season. I knew that Mike McDonald would have a very competent defense, which would really help put Sam Darnold in positive game scripts. And the running attack has been fine. But I think I've been really impressed with how he started the season with the Seahawks, and how they've protected him. And I think obviously the way that the Buccaneers game ended, with his interception, it wasn't even a classic Sam Darnold interception. I think it bounced off of someone's helmet and into the arms of Levante David. So I think that he's proven that the Seahawks, once again, they moved on from Russell Wilson at the right time. They moved off from Geno Smith at the right time. My concern for Sam Darnold is that when your career is going to fall off a cliff, because when they decide to move on from him, he's probably looking at Geno and Russell going, "Oh well, I'm third in this." But for now, he's enough, and it's looking good for the division at the moment. So I'm really impressed with him.
I don't think many people would have had the NFC West as the most exciting division through 7 weeks of the season, but the Cardinals have lost 5 straight games after a positive start. But the other 3 teams on 5-2, being the Rams, the 49ers, and the Seahawks. To go to my JSN hype, he was my favorite player coming out of college, but I think ever. He went 1 pick before the Chargers, who then took Quentin Johnston, and I was absolutely devastated. Mm-hmm. His numbers this year are off the scale, like absolutely off the scale. And this is no slight on any wide receiver in the NFL, because we all know how good Chase and Puka and JJ and Amon-Ra St. Brown are. But Jamar Chase, with 58 catches, is second in receiving yards this season with 629. JSN has got almost 200 more than anyone, and he's doing it on fewer catches. He's got 9 more catches of over 20 yards than Jamar Chase. He's got 5 catches of more than 40, which the next best is George Pickens with 3, and then everyone else has got 2 or 1. Kendrick Bourne makes that list on the bizarre career revival discussion.
Hey, but, NFC West, what can I say?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. JSN's there in third for the NFC West. Puka Nacua in third, obviously has missed a game as well. But both Puka and Jamar Chase have got more catches than JSN. When he went to the Seahawks, I was really, really concerned that, just from a lover of the sport, that because he had Metcalf and Lockett in front of him, was it going to be a case of like how the Green Bay Packers have always done with quarterbacks, where you let them sit behind a little bit, learn, and then they come good? Or was this going to be a case of he's going to become a forgotten man in the offense? And I'm so glad it's more the former, because he looks so good right now. He's just every single player. I say this in very biased Chargers hat about Lad McConkey, but you watch any play with JSN at any level of the field, and he's open pretty much consistently. And I don't know many. He is a big reason. Him and Darnold have carried this, not carried this team, because they haven't been bad on defense or at running the ball. But where would you rank him? I guess is the question I'll throw to you. Is where would you have him in your scale of wide receivers?
I mean, it's a difficult one, because I think that JSN almost has a little bit of what the Colts had in some of the previous statistics. So he came into the NFL and he was, the undisputed number 1 wide receiver in that draft class. Like, it wasn't even close. He was the only one that definitely had the kind of the grade to be a top 10. I know, that wasn't necessarily what ended up transpiring. That's because, of position scarcity, but he was the undisputed number 1 wide receiver coming into that draft class. And I think because the wide receiver class was maybe viewed a little bit weak, we ended up seeing the fact that he was almost lumped in with them as this is a poor wide receiver class, so therefore don't have high expectations for any wide receiver coming out. And I think we're kind of seeing the reversal of that with the more recent wide receiver classes, with like the likes of Marvin Harrison coming in. If you were to have him on the same trajectory as JSN, then the best of Harrison is still yet to come, and you shouldn't expect it at all. So I think for me, the target share for JSN is a big lead, but why teams aren't adjusting to just simply try and take him out of the game more, and ask questions of the Seahawks kind of play calling as a result of that, I don't know. But I think in terms of ranking him, it's a clear example of a wide receiver that can do everything. I think one of the most kind of iconic plays of his, probably from 1 or 2 seasons ago now, and I don't know if you've seen it, is the play where he's running a deep route, but it's play action and it's gone to the running back. But he carries on his route, faking the ball coming in overhead because the 2 defensive backs continue to track him, thinking that the ball is coming their way. They haven't even looked. That is intelligence that you don't often see from the average player in the league. To have that kind of understanding of the play calling. There's a lot of receivers, there's a lot of players out there who they understand what is asked of them, and they know that if their route is not going to be the one that gets called for, they'll break it off. They won't bother. There's a litany of players like that. Odell Beckham basically got Baker chased out of Cleveland over the fact that his dad called him out because Odell wasn't running the right route. So I think for me, like, JSN has that intelligence that you just must love if you've got him in your offense. I think the slow development piece, I think, has almost surprised people. But he was a quality wide receiver coming out of Ohio State, I think it was, wasn't it? And they have churned out some phenomenal wide receivers in years. So there's no reason to really just have doubted his slow start would culminate in this.
Just quickly before we move on, I've very much enjoyed this JSN hype. But that play that you mentioned, if you haven't seen it, if you're listening and haven't seen it, it's well worth watching. It's Geno Smith as well, which is the funniest part of it. I just wanted
it's him scampering.
It's Geno Smith scrambling for about 30 yards, and the two. I don't know if it's the safety or the corner are made to look like right mugs. It's very funny. So go look that one. Our final rank.
Yeah.
Podcasts, I think, are meant to be informative and fun to listen to. And at this point, that's going to drop off a cliff because I don't know what the hell this is, to be perfectly honest with you. But as I said, in researching the show, I was trying to find different ways, creative ways that, you can rank teams. And I stumbled across what is called the FPI. Now, I had never heard of the FPI. It was something new to me. I found it on the ESPN website called the Football Power Index. Now, looking at this enormous spreadsheet on the ESPN website, it seems to take into account it ranks the offense and defense with certain values. It has the strength of schedule, and it also ranks the special teams, which I like as well. So this includes all 3 phases of the game, who the teams have played, the strength of the remaining teams, and in some big equation, which I'm not clued up on and I'm sure would be way too boring to read out, that pumps out a number at the end to rank in, I guess this is the most nerdy way, statistically, who the best team in the NFL is, which is very interesting if you're that way inclined, and we certainly are. But I was again surprised by the golf in this number. These numbers, by the way, you'll see them on the screen. They don't represent like a percentage or anything. They're just the number that comes out at the end. But you can take away from the gaps, sort of the difference in each number, how big a margin it is. And by far, the best team in the NFL, according to this number calculation, is, and we're back to the PTSD, the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a number. The FPI number that they've got here is 7.9, which is a good margin ahead of the Detroit Lions in second with 5.5. They're a whole point clear of the Green Bay Packers with 4.5. And then the next teams are all very quite close. The Rams 4.3, Colts 4.2, and then off the graph, we have the top 5 on the screen. But just after the Colts, very, very narrowly behind them, are the Philadelphia Eagles. And then there's a bit of a gap, and then 3 teams come in a row. Your team, the Bills, my team, the Chargers, and my pick, the Broncos, all come just behind there. The rest of the teams in that next group are all like reasonably good teams. Your Cowboys, your Seahawks, your Bucks are all behind there. In fact, I thought the Bucks would be slightly higher on this list. But again, I don't know how this equation works. But when we look at the betting markets and the Chiefs are the favourites, that has a massive case of what we've seen, where people are putting money, and because people have got this Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes hangover, people are more inclined to bet on the Chiefs because they know that they've been there, they've done it, they've got that winning record. This is a completely empirical, non-biased equation, and yet the Chiefs are massively in front in this number. So what is, if you're trying to take off any bias, what is the argument for you behind the fact that the Chiefs are so far ahead here?
So I think you have hit the nail on the head there with what goes into this. So roughly 35% is based on offensive efficiency, 35% is based on defensive efficiency, 10% is based on special teams. I know you're thinking that doesn't add up to, I think it might be 30%, 10%. So we get to 70%. You then get a further 10% based on returning starters, another 10% based on recruitment of talent that's been judged but through the draft and free agency, and then also returning of coaches. And if it's those last 3 that I think are pretty crucial to why the Kansas City Chiefs are as far up as they are. You've got the Andy Reid and the Steve Spagnuolo kind of led offense and defense. That's going to be massive. However they equate that in terms of scoring, that's ultimately going to be such a big difference between, say, the Detroit Lions, who've just lost both their offensive and their defensive coordinators, which is going to massively hurt them there. So I think that is going to be one of the big differences that we see between both of those teams. It also takes into account things like, like you said, the amount of travel and all of these things, but also the recent seasons and the successes that we've seen. So the data, in a way, is being engineered to provide bias, to almost take into account that how do we quantify that the Chiefs keep winning? There is some sort of intangible formula somewhere in the fact that they've got good coaches, good play calling. If the same guys are coming back, why are we going to doubt that we wouldn't expect them to go deep again? So I fully expect and understand why the Chiefs are where they are. And I can understand in a way why they may be statistically quite a way ahead of some of the other teams, just based on purely some of the metrics that fed into the overall data points.
Yeah, I mentioned the Buccaneers. I think they're one of the teams that's slightly hard done by here.
Yeah.
And they've lost Liam Cohen. There has been some changeover. They've banged up beyond all belief as a team. Mm-hmm. So that comes into it. I'm not surprised that you knew all the breakdown of the numbers behind it. Of course you did. That's why we had you come on this episode. What would be, having looked at all these numbers then, because there is no one right way or wrong way, is there? Ultimately, this is a futile exercise because there is no correct way of saying who the best team in the NFL is. There's plenty of different metrics you can look at and that we've just looked at to decide. But ultimately, it's a heart and head sort of debate, isn't it? You can look at the numbers, but everyone has their own personal sway and bias on these things. So we've seen what the numbers say. We've seen what the odds say. But what do you say? Who do you think is the best team currently in the NFL?
So I think okay. So I
not put you on the spot or anything.
No. Well, I should have expected it, really, shouldn't I? So I think the team in the ascendancy is the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think that is what we're seeing in some of these metrics. Yes, they don't have the most wins, but they are the team in the ascendancy. They're coming from behind almost. They are buoyed by the fact that their number one receiver is now back. I think if they could get their left tackle, who to date has been very, very good on the field and obviously has some personal issues that he's dealing with, if they can get him back, I think that's a massive kind of boost for them as well. That's been a position of an issue for them. So I think the Chiefs are the ascending team, but I also would argue that until I see the Colts show, until they flinch, for me, they are the team to beat. I appreciate that they need to face bigger and better teams. When you look at their schedule, they're not really coming. Like, there's not a whole host of big teams. And I think one of the challenges that you'll get is that what a team looks like right now, you look at a strength of schedule right now, and I think you look at it and you're only ever 1 or 2 injuries away from that team not being the team that you would have expected. And I probably, would raise the fact that Monday Night Football, we're going to see Marcus Mariota for the Washington Commanders against the Kansas City Chiefs. If that was Jaden Daniels, and if that was Terry McLaurin, and if that was Deebo Samuel fully fit as well, that is a completely different strength of schedule win versus what it's actually going to be, which on paper looks like it should be a relatively easy win for the Chiefs. So I think, when you're looking at the strength of the schedule now with the injuries mounting up, and there have been a lot, I think that I'm not discounting the Colts from arguably winning a lot more games, having a bit of home field advantage in the playoffs. And only injuries, I feel, only injuries across maybe their offensive line, and maybe at running back, could really hurt them there. So for me, it's the Chiefs and the Colts are the ascended and the ascending, in kind of reverse order.
23rd of November, that's going to be the day to watch. Chiefs against the Colts at Arrowhead. That'll be a great one on the 23rd of November. I think the best team in the NFL is the Denver Broncos. No, I'm only joking. Only joking. I would agree with everything you just said. Frustratingly, I think until the Chiefs, start slowing down again, if they do slow down again, now they're back to a full complement. Rashee Rice went straight back into being elite on Sunday. I know they were against a poor team in the form of the Raiders, but he just went straight back to it as if nothing had happened. So I think that's terrifying to watch from the outside looking in. If you're looking at this Chiefs team, after 2 weeks, you were like, licking your lips. They're gone. It's done. The reign of terror, the 10 years of winning the AFC West consecutively, this will be the year it ends. And even though the Broncos and the Chargers aren't doing badly, you still now put your money on the Chiefs, which is why the Chiefs come out as the top on the betting market. Jake, thank you very much for joining and indulging me with your statistical prowess. I hope everyone listening has enjoyed, but as I touched on a few times, I do want to talk about the Colts a little bit more just to round off this episode, because we're getting all the hype over here. We're very excited by what we're seeing, particularly if you're a Colts fan. But what's it like over in the States? What are the fans in Indianapolis saying? Is it the same level of pandemonium around this team? And we're going to answer that question now. Jake, thank you very much for joining us. We will have you on, I'm sure. Good luck to the Bills this weekend. And now we're just going to finish off by talking a bit more Colts. It is now time to talk Colts, the team that are sitting 6-1 going into week 8 of the season. The most wins, as we have just discussed with Jake, they're leading the metrics in many, many different statistical fields. But I want to talk Colts. I want to talk the view over here and get the view stateside. So joining the huddle once more is the Colts writer for the Huddle UK, Ed. Ed, welcome in. And special guest to join us to end this episode as well is the host of the First and 56 podcast from the States, and that's Rondo. Rondo, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. Obviously, we're talking football, so I'm feeling amazing, especially the way it's been going so far.
Yeah, I mean, that's the perfect way to start this off, isn't it? Because me and Ed were talking over the summer. In the summer, with as part of this podcast, we talked to each fan or a fan from each team to get their vibes ahead of the start of the season. And Ed was saying things have gone really badly for the Colts if they end up starting Daniel Jones over Anthony Richardson. And I'm not saying that to throw you under the bus there, Ed, because I think most Colts fans were in that same camp as you. It's remarkable sitting here now with the Colts leading their AFC. So I said earlier on in this podcast episode that I don't think even the most optimistic Colts fan would have foreseen this start to the season. So, Rondo, I guess I'll start with you. Being part of a massive Colts community out in the States, you've got thousands of followers for your podcast. Did you know anyone in your circles who predicted such an incredible start?
Not even close, and probably next to no one. I mean, because at least that was my narrative, was that with Daniel Jones, we've seen what he is, and I don't think he's going to turn it around magically a la Sam Darnold. And yet here we are later, and he has turned it around a la Sam Darnold in Minnesota. But absolutely not even close to predicted. I think when we did our record prediction, I want to say I gave us 5 wins. I think I gave us a floor of 5 with a ceiling of 7 to 8. And that was the best case scenario. You know, I was kind of like everyone else. Team Bridgerton, you drafted him 4th overall. He obviously has to start. I'm like, my logic was that if you can't beat out Daniel Jones, then you have no business being in the league, because Daniel Jones is a terrible quarterback. And yet I'm back on eating my words. I've still said I'm not fully on the Daniel Jones hype train yet. And really, I'm kind of looking at it now of that. I can't join it because I think something's bad gonna happen if I do join it. So I have to continue just hating on it, and I don't want to jinx anything. But yeah, if anyone said that they saw this coming all along, no, you're a liar. You're an absolute liar. There's no way. There's absolutely no way.
I would agree with you there. I think, because that goes back to my point, Ed, that this is all going very well, but even Colts fans, even Rondo's just saying it there is still this sense of trepidation, might be quite strong a word, but do you still believe? I guess most teams, when they go 6-1, like the Chiefs, when they went 6-1 last year, they were winning games but it was the Chiefs, the Chiefs are going to win games because that's what the Chiefs do. Whereas the Colts winning games with a quarterback who we pretty much, as an NFL fans, as a community, had written off as being a starting quarterback in the NFL. So is it the case that we should just start buying into this 100% now? This is an elite Super Bowl caliber team, or are the wheels going to fall off?
I think that's a really interesting question, and one that, as a fan, I'm sort of in two minds about, because I think if this was any team that wasn't my team, I'd be saying, yeah, 100% get on board by the hype. When it's your own team, I think you're sort of scarred with that element of skepticism, aren't you? That you don't want to believe because you don't want to get yourself hurt, essentially. Like, for example, this weekend we're playing Tennessee. Again, if it was any team other than the Colts playing Tennessee, I'd be like, don't even watch it. Like, this isn't going to be a game. But because it's your own team, you do sort of retain that sort of, I don't know if I can fully buy in, because like Rondo just said there about the buying into Daniel Jones, I kind of think as soon as I do buy in, the wheels are just going to come straight off, and it's all just going to go to pot. So there's kind of that superstition element. What I would say is that this is a very good football team. I think that we've proven through 7 weeks that this is, wherever this season ends for the Colts, they have proven through these first 6 weeks that they are a capable football team, and they are playing some really, really good, efficient and clean football. And it's also, from a fan perspective, I enjoy watching the games again, which is a really, and not just because we're winning, but because the football is good to watch and the games are entertaining. So to answer your question, yes, I think this is a good football team. But as a fan, I'm sort of retaining that fan skepticism of not wanting to kind of go fully in because I don't want to commit myself and get hurt. That's probably the answer I'm going to give you.
I think the best way that I can ask is, Rondo, do you know anyone, or have you bought a Daniel Jones jersey?
No, absolutely not. So jokingly, I said that if he beats the week 1 curse, I'll consider it. I think I'm gonna put a hard cap on it of if he eliminates the at Jacksonville curse, I will go buy one. That I'll set that hardcore right now that I will go buy one. I mean, like I've been pushing. I first I said week 1, then I said if we go 8-0, to which the Rams game, as far as I'm concerned, we won that game. So I give him a pass for that one. So. But now the hard cap is if he eliminates the Jacksonville curse, I'll bite the bullet and go buy one.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? Fans aren't rushing to go buy Daniel Jones jerseys because they're terrified. And I get it. I do get it. And I think it was last week's podcast that I mentioned. When I think Daniel Jones, I still think of that play where he was absolutely scot-free for the Giants and still fell over himself. That sort of like summed him up as a player. It's like, okay, that was good, and then you're the maker of your own downfall. But he hasn't done anything this season, has he, to merit criticism? I don't think in any game, obviously everyone has a bad play here or there, but he hasn't done anything to draw attention to himself, which I think is probably the best thing you can say about him, because the knock on him being an MVP candidate would be how good Jonathan Taylor is. And we were saying it, Ed, just before we started recording. Jonathan Taylor goes a bit, not unrecognized, but isn't the flashy media name. He's not Saquon Barkley. He isn't Christian McCaffrey. But his numbers this season are unbelievable. Where would you, I'm going to put you on the spot, but where would you rank him in terms of the running backs in the league? Not on present form, because present form he would have to be number one. But in terms of his talent, what other players do you associate him with?
I've always said that he's underneath CMC and Saquon, but then kind of in that realm of where you have Bijan, Gibbs. They're kind of all competing for that who's really number 3 by just body of work. Like you said, obviously this season, he's kind of cinemized himself as number 1, but I've always kind of held to the fact that CMC, if we're just talking pure health, CMC is the best running back in this league, and then you go Saquon, but then it's like I said, it's the Gibbs, the JTs, the Henrys of the world. But yeah, I would say he's at the bottom. He's number 4.
Ed, I assume that would be an agreement on your part.
Yeah, it would. Although obviously this season, I think he is playing quite comfortably. I think he's probably the most important player in the league, full stop, right now. I'd argue that, Daniel Jones, we've just talked about how great Daniel Jones has been, but Jonathan Taylor is a real game changer. Set another 3 touchdowns at the weekend. Sorry, Phil. Phil's Chargers fan. Sorry about that. Can edit that bit out, Phil. It's fine.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I had my moment earlier where I was pleased that we'd beaten the Vikings on Thursday Night Football. At some point, someone's got to throw a dig at us. So I'll leave it.
It's not a dig, but I also think you can't underestimate how good the offensive line has been this year as well. And that plays massively into it. I think right now, I don't think there's a more important player to a team than Jonathan Taylor is to the Indianapolis Colts.
The head coach, Shane Steichen, I don't know. Again, I'm not a Colts fan, so I'm not as intertwined in the community as you guys. But I got a sense last season that not necessarily on the hot seat, but there was a few grumbles, let's say, a few rumblings about Colts fans not necessarily happy in what was being put onto the field. Rondo, I guess that's all out the window now, isn't it?
So the thing with the Steichen being on the hot seat, I think that was just more tied to the fact that a lot of Colts fans were done with Chris Ballard, and it was a mindset of, if you get rid of the GM, you have to get rid of the head coach because you want the new GM to be able to pick his guy. I don't think it was really so much an indictment on not liking Steichen as it was with like kind of the tail end of the Frank Reich era. But I think it was just more so his attachment to Ballard, since that was his hire. But yeah, I think if you were to separate the two, a lot of people would have said that if you were going to fire Ballard, that you would want to keep Steichen anyway.
Fair enough. I knew I could be wrong on the outside. Ed, you've already touched upon that Tennessee game, which comes out the day after this podcast comes out, Sunday the 26th. That's in one of the later window games over here in the UK, very early on for Rondo on the west side of the States. If you try and step away from the fact you're a Colts fan, Ed, I know that's hard. I understand how ridiculously difficult that is. But this must be, I haven't looked at the odds, but this has to be one of the most one-sided games on paper of the season, of any game of any week.
I think I saw the spread was like the Colts were sort of minus 14.5, which I can't remember the Colts being favoured by that big of a scoreline for a very, very long time. I think, going back to your original point there about sort of getting your takes on how the Colts have viewed this side, and obviously in America, I think one of the biggest signs this side of the pond is it's been selected for Sky and it's a blackout game. So the fact that it's sort of, we're getting a bit more notification on a main UK broadcaster shows that people are maybe starting to sit up and take notice. And funnily enough, I've seen a change in the narrative since it took sort of beating the Chargers in LA, I think, for a lot more people to sit up, because there was this kind of, I call it a lazy narrative, because you can only beat the teams that are on your schedule, and there is no easy game in the NFL. I strongly believe that. but it has sort of taken that game in LA for a lot of people to sort of step up and go, actually, no, this team is looking like we do need to start taking this team seriously.
I think the statistic about the Colts, which I love, it's not actually a good statistic necessarily, but I think when you're 6-1 and you can claim this, it's amazing that in no game this season have the Colts had a receiver with 100 yards. Not one receiver has topped 100 yards in a single game this year. And there's that old expression or cliche, isn't it, that a team is only as strong as its weakest member. But this is a case that this team isn't flashy. It's not your superstars, your Mahomes, your Kelseys. It's just a full roster of good players, all working for each other. So, Rondo, in your time supporting them, does this feel, in the prime of Andrew Luck, does this feel in that same sort of scope and of excitement and Manning and that sort of era?
Well, I think if you want to compare like this roster to like the Luck rosters, it's more complete on the offensive side. You go back to a lot of those Luck rosters. As you had Andrew, he never necessarily had a running back for most of his career here. He had one, I think, at the peak of his time, he had two weapons when he had Reggie Wayne and T.Y. Hilton. But for the most part, it's been a lot of similar to what you see around the league. Is like you've got the quarterback, you've got the one receiver that he peppers with targets, and everyone else kind of fishes for it. This team, we said it on our show when we drafted Richardson that the pieces are all there. He's the quarterback's the one to put it all together. A lot of our, like, you look at our receiver room. Obviously, I've been pounding the table that Michael Pittman is a receiver one in this league. He's never gonna lead the league in yards. Receptions will be up there, but like he's never gonna be like a Justin Jefferson, a Jamar Chase type of guy. But he's absolutely a top tier receiver in this league. And you go down the list. Obviously, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, obviously, and Tyler Warren. All of those guys are extremely solid. They would start on other teams. They may not necessarily star on other teams, but when you have a bunch of twos, it makes up for the lack of having like that bona fide number one. And even then, like I've said, and Michael Pittman is the real Canton guard Mike, and he's receiver one.
Yeah, Tyler Warren, the name you just mentioned there, we all have our takes. I'm looking foolish for my Colston Loveland is better than Tyler Warren take, but at least right now. I mean, it's still very early days in their career, but Tyler Warren has the most receiving yards of any tight end in football. This is the third straight year where a rookie tight end has burst onto the scene. It was a fact in the NFL that didn't happen. Before Sam Laporta did it and then Brock Bowers did it, rookie tight ends were a non-factor in the NFL pretty much consistently every single year. But Tyler Warren has been incredible. I have to hold my hands up. 439 receiving yards on the season so far. I think there's only about 5 players who've got more 20-yard catches than him, and they're the names you expect, your Justin Jeffersons, your JSNs, who we've already waxed lyrical about on this episode. So for you, Ed, Tyler Warren, he's the player who you'd probably go out and buy the jersey of now, isn't it? Not Daniel Jones.
I think so. I think he's definitely looking every inch the player that we hoped that he would be, and he seems to be able to knit this offense together. Just going back to the point Rondo made there, about when Richardson was drafted and the pieces being in place, I think I did say sort of pre-season that if the Colts could get anything above average quarterback play, which I think we can all agree we've got more than that, this is a playoff caliber roster. And I think that is now being sort of shown. And I think Tyler Warren, yeah, absolutely, Phil. You just mentioned the numbers there. He's been superb in sort of every aspect of the game, to be honest with you, because it's not just his receptions, it's also his blocking ability. He's also he can also sort of line up in wildcat and take snaps if he has to. He can help, he can play as a fullback. He can pretty much do everything. You could almost see how excited Shane Steichen was when he drafted him about the kind of Swiss Army knife, I think is the right phrase there, type player. He can literally do it all, and he is so far. It is very early days, but yeah, absolutely living up to the billing. And certainly, yeah, if I'm going to get a jersey, he's going to be right up there at the moment. It's either him or Nelson.
We had a few NFL mates when we got together to do our draft. As you do in the end of the summer, we had sort of a chat where we were trying to make our boldest takes on the season. And my bold take was that Tyler Warren will throw more touchdowns than Anthony Richardson. And this was just before Daniel Jones got confirmed as the starter. So I was saying it tongue in cheek, but every time he's lined up in Wildcat, please throw it. Please throw it. Because that would be the best. best prediction ever if that comes off. Keep Daniel Jones healthy and just Tyler Warren just throw one, because I don't think Anthony Richardson's thrown a single touchdown this season unless the Colts go 15 wins and they start him in the final game. So long may that continue. Rondo, of course, you've got your own podcast, as I said at the top, First and 56th. It's yourself and two friends as well. If people listening to this are Colts fans and they want to go check out your podcast, where can they find you?
Absolutely. Obviously, anywhere and everywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. So, Spotify, iTunes, Buzzsprout, Stitcher. On YouTube, we are part of the Sideline Sports organization. So if you look up Sideline Sports on YouTube, you can catch us on there. We have a Facebook channel as well. You can find us there. And then obviously on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, at First and 56.
Yeah, and Ed, of course, you've got plenty of Colts stuff yourself on this side of the pond. I always go to type in Colts, but you're at GB_Colts.
Yeah,
am I not right?
That's
mistaken?
me. Yeah, and then we've also got the Southbound UK pod where we talk mainly Colts, but we do try and talk about the other teams in the AFC South as well.
Well, just before we say goodbye and round up this episode, it wouldn't be an episode of this podcast if I didn't put people on the spot. Rondo, I'm going to start with you. It's 6-1 currently. Where are the Colts ending up this season? How far do they get in the playoffs? And, is Daniel Jones leading you to a Vince Lombardi trophy?
I think I see us in where we're in 13, 14 win range by the end of the season. I think anything less than an AFC Conference Championship appearance would be a failure, the rate we're rolling. As for Lombardi, let me see who we're playing if we get there, but I think we're finally getting home playoff football back in Indianapolis, which I'm going to be out there for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed, same question to you.
Do you know what? I've been having this internal dialogue for so long, so I don't want to actually say it out loud, but it would be remiss to disagree. I think playoffs now definite, and then let's just see what happens is kind of my approach. I don't want to.
No. That's not how that happens. That's not how that works. No. Let's just see what happens is not an answer to the question, because I need to be able to.
I know you
do.
I know you do. That's yeah. Daniel Jones will be standing under confetti in San Francisco come February.
That's what I wanted. That's the clip.
There's
Absolutely.
your.
Hey, the Colts haven't done anything to suggest that won't be the case so far this season. As Rondo touched upon, the only one defeat was against the Rams, and that could have very, very easily gone another way. Rondo, thank you very much for joining the HuddleUK podcast. I appreciate your time. As Rondo was just saying, and you can go find his podcast, the Proper Colts podcast from the States, over on everything at First and 56th. It is on X, and all the links are there. Ed, thank you very much as well for jumping back in. I know you've been on before, and you can go read all of Ed's Colts opinions over at the HuddleUK website. Everyone else's as well, but as I said right at the top, 32 writers for all 32 teams. Whoever you support, there's something for you at HuddleUK. And we'll catch you next week on the HuddleUK podcast. Thank you very much for joining.